This is a land use committee meeting, and it's January 6th, 2026. And we're recording this meeting. And my name is Ann Mazar, and I'm the chair of the committee. And why don't we go around the room?
Sure. I'm Elena Brugos, the select board member of the committee.
Ariana Rolla, planning board representative.
Frank?
Frank Nero, land use member.
Ella?
Isn't
And there's more member of the Conservation Commission.
Thank you. Okay. Did you have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
All right, you want to make a motion? Accept the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as shared.
Second.
Any discussion?
It was a short meeting.
Yeah, what? All those in favor?
Elena Brugos, aye.
Ariana Rolla, aye.
Frank?
Frank Nero, I.
And Ann Mazar, aye. So we're gonna have the land use committee and the community preservation, the CPA public hearing on January 21st, and it'll be at 6:35 at the select board meeting. And that's just to let people know, open it. I mean, the meetings are always open, but just, if anybody has any ideas and questions about land use or the 5-year land use plan or, CPA projects. So, and I'll be at that. Elena, you'll be there too.
I will.
So. Oh, and then the next thing I wanted to talk about, I wanted to announce a project that some people are working on, me included, and Elena included too. We're
Cheerleading roles.
Yeah. So there's a group of us, led by Marty and Sharon Luttrell, who worked for the Telegram and Gazette, wanted to start a local paper, online paper, because right now the Milford Daily News isn't really covering local news. The Free Press comes out once a month, but there's not a source with all of the Mendon information. And so the idea, it's all volunteers that are working on this idea, and it would just be an online paper, but it's just to inform people about what's going on in Mendon, all the public hearings, what's happening at the different meetings, even like obituaries, so people know, who died, events going on. But it will be not political. We're not having comments, and we don't want it to turn into a Facebook type of thing. It's more of a gathering of information. And we're hopefully something will be out in January, and it's a work in progress because everybody's volunteers. But we're going to encourage people to submit articles. And the name of the paper is the Mendon Commons. And then the tagline is building community through local news. Because just right now, things seem to be a little polarized. And so we're hoping that maybe this will, pull people together, that want to know about Mendon and, be involved and whatnot.
Online newspaper.
Online, yeah, just because it's all volunteers and we're not taking any ads or anything. That was the other thing. So, we're not competing with the Free Press, no ads.
No subscriptions.
I mean, the subscription's free. So, yeah. So it would be, I'm not sure how, I guess maybe an email might go out or something, but
Yeah, so Sharon is working on figuring out email options, but at this point, there's a website in progress, and the plan is for it to be free.
right.
So you'll go to the website to read the paper.
Yeah, I think maybe it would be right now it's just gonna be sort of on ongoing as things happen, articles will be added as, people have time to do it. But I think it might be that people are if you're subscribed, people would get a notification in their email,
She talked about, different models for an email digest. But the frequency of that is to be determined, whether it would be weekly or as articles are posted.
Yeah.
But it would be also a place where people could share the articles on Facebook, even though it wouldn't be necessarily Facebook. Which is a place I think there are a number of people who missed having, the town crier was at least every couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit more, they had, there were reporters who would come to some town meetings and report. So this is, you know, to fill a little bit of that gap, but not displace the newspapers that are already out there and doing work, but to fill a different hole.
Mhm. And so, yeah, we welcome ideas. You know, if you have something that you want in the paper, you know, contact us, but we're hoping in January that something will be sent out to people. For some reason, the town hall door is locked and people
Oh.
can't get in. So I don't know.
Okay, was it locked?
Well, I,
Yeah, okay.
Huh.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so you couldn't get in, huh?
No, it was locked. That's what Peter said. He's on his way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Right.
how are you going to get the word out to the town people that this is available now?
Yeah. I'm gonna
So, the people spearheading it are planning to come to meetings, so Sharon Luttrell is going to be presenting to the select board, and I believe there will be posts on Facebook as
Yeah.
well, sharing that the information is out there, but I think, you know, word of mouth is also a goal, so, but I think, I'm sure that she would welcome ideas about how else to reach people. I don't think there's going to be a physical mailing, because that costs. But yeah, I think, I'm sure she would welcome suggestions of other ways of reaching.
Maybe put up the paper that gets published now.
Good idea.
What was that?
Maybe put some sort of a blurb or something in the paper that gets published now, that gets out into every house.
Mhm.
No, if you're gonna be doing something like that, might be.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I mean, select board or Jeremy say it's okay to send this out like to the all users email, we'll do that, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Because it'll be a private entity, so, as opposed to a town entity, but one where hopefully the town will be able to contribute, updates, I think.
Yeah.
Sharon has spoken with Jeremy about this, so we'll hear more in a couple of weeks. So Sharon will be presenting to the select board on I believe also the January 21st meeting. So yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll hear more then.
Right.
But yeah, ideas. I'm sure she'll appreciate ideas about how to get the word out. So
I like the idea.
pass that on.
I missed the town crier.
Yeah, well, pretty much. And we've also told department heads and, you know, a lot of our contacts just to say that it's happening, and everyone, I mean, says, oh, yeah, that's really needed. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so Terry Moore is here and he is going to do a presentation on land management. You want to come up here and Isabella too, I guess.
I'm sharing.
And we thought this would be helpful because, you know, we're the land use committee. We work with, you know, the different properties, and so. Can you, you don't need to do anything.
Is there anybody on Zoom or Frank?
Yeah, Frank.
I wonder, would it make sense to be over here?
Yeah, do you want
since
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
If there's a speaker phone, I would, a speaker over there, I would love to have you use it.
Do I have to sit next to Peter?
No.
I think like this spot is maybe a little more
Luxurious
visible
space.
for the camera.
Pneumonia's,
What's that?
flu is totally.
I was to pee.
Musical chairs.
You got the blue over there. That's the last thing I want.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me begin and thank you for permitting us to come before you and talk a little bit about planning for conservation areas in Mendon. For those of you who I have not met, I come from a background of being a retiree of the National Park Service, and I was director of planning, park planning and special studies in the Northeast region. which basically is Maine to Virginia, and West Virginia and Pennsylvania being the non-coastal states. Prior to that, I spent 20 years as director of the 1.1 million acre Pinelands National Reserve in southern New Jersey. And since I've been retired, I've been member of various teams doing consulting with national park agencies in Colombia, Peru, and Paraguay. And I've been a resident of your lovely town for exactly 1 year,
Oh, wow.
this past Christmas. When I was interviewed by the Conservation Commission for its opening, the last question I received was from this person over here, Isabella, who asked if I could be of some assistance with building public support and planning for conservation areas under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And I immediately said yes, because that's my love. And we proceeded to have a couple of meetings together and came up with an approach to planning at least one pilot conservation area, a process of planning. It's not an unusual process. It's one that is being employed in most protected areas here in the United States and many outside of this country. We place here in the US a slightly more emphasis on visitor use and visitor experience, not simply just conservation or preservation. That theory is based on a lot of research and experience that people who understand, appreciate, become involved in the resource tend to want it protected for the future, and indeed even more conservation areas created for their enjoyment and their education and understanding of our natural resources. So we got together and we put together this little PowerPoint to show you the process that we'd like to undertake, at least in an initial conservation area that exists within Mendon. Let's start. The objectives of this process, I'm not going to read everything. You're adults, and I am assuming you have an educational background that permits you to do that all by yourself. I might highlight a few things. What we're really about in the end is the last one. Every planning activity tries to protect ecological historic resources and foster appreciation. What we want to do is try to promote public understanding and support for continued protection of lands that are protected. The Conservation Commission is charged by Massachusetts law to develop statements of overall purposes and undertake planning for conservation areas within the communities that they exist. There are a lot of pre-planning steps. I think, again, what is lacking at this point in time, but would be the subject particularly of importance, is the statement of overall purpose, goals, and objectives for Mendon's conservation areas. Go ahead. There are some pre-planning activities that we need to undertake. We need a pilot place. Isabella has a favorite one, and I'll just say it's Muddy Brook as an initial one. But what we'd like to have is a group of people make that ultimate decision. We need to think about what is the period of planning that we're undertaking. Is it a short period? Is it a long period? That's something that needs to be discussed, and the strengths and weaknesses of all of those need to be explored. The process is very straightforward. Again, I'm not going to read all these except perhaps point out a few of them. Statement of significance and statements of purpose. Why was this land acquired? What are the attributes that make it important in the community? What are the fundamental and important resources of the area? Fundamental resources are tied directly to purpose of acquisition and significance of the resource. It is the essence of why the resource is being protected. Important resources are not those that are directly attributable to why it's in public ownership, but they're important nevertheless. A stone wall may not have been the reason to acquire a property. We have stone walls everywhere. But that stone wall on this property may at least tells a story of either agricultural use or it's a property boundary. It still is a resource that needs to be protected. But fundamental resources are really the essence. Why did we acquire this? Was it because it was an agricultural property? Does it have some historic significance in the community? Does it have a view shed that's overwhelmingly wonderful? What's the real reason we put it into public ownership? Those resources are the ones we need to concentrate on and to develop strategies for protection. The condition assessment. What are these resources? How are they today? Are they in good shape? Do they need improvement? Those are important aspects of any planning activity that is undertaken. What are values? There are two things that we always have to keep in mind when we're planning a protected area. There are the physical resources, a wetland, a forest, a historic structure. Those are tangible resources that we can see. Values are intangible. They are either our relationship to the resource, they are things that the resource represent to us, or they are the feelings that we have within an environment rich with resources. That young man sitting by the lake, he's not just looking at water. He's experiencing something in that environment that is all by himself. He's contemplating perhaps not just nature, but what the lake means to him, whether it's from a recreational standpoint, a scenic standpoint. I think all of us at some point have been somewhere where it hits our mind. We're not just looking at something, we're thinking about it. That's a value. Those little rocks over there are all over New England. I have some in my yard as a boundary, but they're not just rocks. They're a story of geology. Those rocks didn't just appear one day. They were the product of ice and storm and movement. They are relatively recent in our society. When Europeans came here, they used wood. They didn't use those rocks. This is mostly a post-revolutionary period development of the property in New England. Why? Very simply, we cut down all the trees for housing, for fireplaces, and all the rest. Those rocks tell a story. Who put them there? They're not just rocks. What was their purpose? Boundary markers, domestic animal, farm field delineations. They have a story to tell. And they're all over the place on lands that are conserved in this community. The middle one, because I'm Irish, or have an Irish ancestry, that's the 69th New York, the Irish division at Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg has a stone wall just like the one in the picture. And if you stand and look over it, you're looking at where those young men just off the boat walked up wave after wave and got blown away at Fredericksburg, Virginia. You have a feeling when you're standing at that wall. It's not just a field, it's a place of death and bravery. So that's the meaning that resources can give to you if you have the right approach to conveying that meaning to a visitor. And I'll leave Fredericksburg because she's getting tired of Fredericksburg. Go ahead. For a property that you're planning, you really need a vision statement. And here's simply an example of whatever conservation area that might be selected in this community. That's why we protect land. That's our vision of what a plan can do to allow residents to relate to those areas.
You mind if I ask, is that an original or that's cut and paste, or that you've written so many of these things that's
It's probably,
one sentence?
it's often one sentence and very long sentence, but no, I did that one, but I think it's representative of a number of different areas that one might look at. On the local level, it's particularly of interest because we don't normally look at locally preserved land in this way as the educational place for people to come and go and understand nature.
But it's natural and cultural.
But so many of these properties have both. We may protect it for its natural attributes, but it often has a cultural relationship. We may protect it for its cultural attributes, but it may also have farmland that was part of that great cultural institution that we're protecting.
And I like landscape sensitive.
I'm sorry.
I like the concept of landscape sensitive
Yeah. So,
opportunities. That's a loaded sense, but that's good.
and the thing about a vision statement, and I'm not going to preach, but vision statements aren't necessarily achievable. They are what you're always striving to achieve, but you may not ever get there totally. But it's that place over there that your actions are aimed at achieving, and you get there as best that you possibly can. We normally look at local protected areas in the sense of where's the best place for a trail, or what kind of science do we need? We don't always look at local areas, but we do at state and federal areas in the context of what is it we're trying to convey to those who visit the area. Themes, interpretive themes, are the ideas that capture the larger meanings of the landscape we're looking at. The stone wall, for example, was just a stone wall. With the theme about agriculture or early settlement, it becomes more than that. It's a representation of a period in the past. They guide what visitors will do and understand. Have Riverbend Farm, known to you all, down the road in Uxbridge, one of their themes is farm to factory. It is a farm. They talk about and show you the milk bottle that came from the farm. But they also talk about the transportation system of the farm down the canal to those who were working in factories. Mendon has lots of farms of that period. Mendon was a component, those farms were, of the bread basket of the American Industrial Revolution. It's not just a farm. It was a component of something much larger, which is a theme. Mendon and the American Industrial Revolution. Blackstone is Blackstone. We all know what Blackstone means in terms of the Industrial Revolution. Visitor use and experience objectives break down the themes into things that visitors can understand. Stories. There are so many stories in this community. I am new here, but I'm learning your stories every day. I learned today, because they put up a big sign, that George Washington's first spy had breakfast here, Nathan Hale. Well, accuracy is also important. Nathan Hale may not have been George's first spy, because George's first spy may have been in Boston in 1775. But it's a good story. It just needs to be accurate. And that's how you break down themes into stories that people can understand and explore in their visit. You went too fast. Those are often expressed in terms of visitors understand something. That's our objective, is to have visitors understand. Visitors see, visitors learn, visitors are exposed to. And once you develop themes and stories, what you want people to understand about the resource, then it's a question of where can people go? What are the sensitivities of the property in question? What can they do within give different areas? If we're going to have a trail, where is it going to be laid out? What are the uses by area that we may permit? There may be an area of a property, a conservation area, that really is very sensitive. We don't want a lot of people running in and out of that area, but it's great for educational use. It's great for research by students. That's a depiction of an area, perhaps a very fine wetland that we don't want people traipsing around, but we do want people to learn about and do research on. There may be other areas that we want to have trails. There may be an area that we want to have a little bit of more intense use, perhaps a clearing that affords a really great view of the night sky. And maybe periodically we want to bring groups in for that experience, and a naturalist in the community might be able to guide them in terms of what they're actually looking at. So it's a zoning activity. Everything can't happen everywhere. It's really trying to divide the properties into the logical location for visitor use. Over the fill period of the plan, we need to discuss the actions that are required for continued resource protection, improvement of resources, additional planning that may be necessary. We want those actions to be quantitative wherever we can do it, and we want to identify additional plans and the roles that people can play. What can the Boy Scouts be of assistance in this property? What about the town recreation department? Can they have a role in fostering increased use and appreciation of the resource over time? That's it. And I should say that they need to be realistic. When you do a plan and you come up with the end product, you really do need to list, what are we going to do in the first year? Is it realistic? How is it going to be funded? What are the roles of various actors in the process of implementing that plan? It sounds a bit complicated, but it isn't at the local level. It is really looking at a piece of property and logically starting to look at how visitors can be attracted to that property, how they can appreciate it, and how they can experience the reason it was purchased, for natural or cultural or a combination of those purposes. So if you have questions, we'd be happy to answer. Our objective here tonight, which we didn't tell you, is that we have formed a small group from the Conservation Commission of 3 members, so we don't have a quorum. We would like to invite you to have someone from this committee join with us. Peter is a member of our committee and of yours, so he doesn't qualify as your representative. But we would love to have a representative to join with us as we go through this process. And you are the major land, I don't want to say developers because that's not what we do, but you are the developers of land conservation in this community. So we'd love to have your participation. But if you have questions, we'd love to try to answer them.
Well, questions and maybe asking, how do you define the area? So you showed Inman Hill, and that's a logical one because we've invested in, there's a lot of mixed uses. You're suggesting that Muddy Brook, which to me is yes, it makes a lot of sense, but that's a big area and the big difference between one end and the other, but that's okay. The only other possible ones I'm thinking was the Boy Scout camp. What would you call that complex? Sort of at the Uxbridge line, where we have the camp.
Oh, Meadowbrook Woods.
Meadowbrook Woods. So those, what scale, or each individual 5-acre parcel, but you're suggesting maybe Muddy Brook.
I think whatever group forms, whether it becomes a subcommittee or a task force, they would pick the pilot property to do the first year and work on. The reason we've kind of talked about Muddy Brook is because that doesn't have any open public access yet. And it's
I would just suggest in my mind, Muddy Brook includes George Street.
No, there's a
includes-
property named Muddy Brook.
Well, that's because to me, it's the whole landscape, and then the town invested it right at, because of the view. And when there used to be an orchard there, that really defined the town. And then now, okay, the town's trying to struggle. What should we do with that land, part of that land? And now we've been gifted, or no, we haven't been gifted. There's other lands up top, which is actually farm. So I don't know how you delineate.
Well, I think, Peter, the first thing we as a conservation commission have to think about is to deal initially with lands that are considered conservation commission lands.
In our possession now.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
And I know we have a new farm property in here, and very close to Muddy Brook, I guess, and perhaps later with a linkage that could be developed. But if it becomes Muddy Brook, I think we have to be very cognizant that we're dealing with a discrete property It is, I don't want to say it's a gateway to Mendon because that's not a fair term, but it's on Route 16 and, you know, it's coming into town.
Well, if we're talking the land on Route 16 that the town purchased, is that what
No.
you're
Going,
Open
you're
space,
talking about
yeah.
north, right?
Yeah,
Muddy Brook
the open
North.
space.
So it's,
There was a long history of why the town should buy that. So, but yes, continue. I'm sorry.
yeah, and I don't know any of these lands, so I'm relying on Isabella and others who have much more knowledge. I would have to go through every piece of land in town and say, well, this one looks good, this one doesn't.
I think that that's a good property to pick because I like that you're doing one property, so it's sort of like a prototype. So then you can kind of, you know, show what the process is. Also, that property, Isabella got the grant, the trail grant, so it really, you know, dovetails nicely with that.
Yeah, we're looking at it as a demonstration property.
Hmm.
And the one thing we haven't talked about, I mentioned trails, but my kids, or our kids, my wife and our kids who are in their 50s, they're no longer kids, but I was going to take them and go to Muddy Brook just to explore because she said that's what I should do. But my daughter works for the trustees. She's in marketing. She's not into the land use stuff. And all of our kids wanted to go where my daughter's group owned a piece of property. So we went to Cormier Woods, which I've been to before. They have new signs there, but they are parking this way, trail this way, and that's all you see. Part of this planning process is how do we better permit people who visit to understand what they're looking at. There's not a single interpretive sign at Cormier Woods. I can look at a sugar maple and do a interpretive discussion and signage all about a sugar maple. You go to a community park and perhaps the Gardens Club had put up sugar maple, acer, sucarum, the Latin or scientific name. You don't know anything about that tree, except it's a sugar maple and it has a scientific name. The sugar maple is a story in and of itself. It is sap. It is syrup. It is European contact and discovery of a sweet. Native Americans had it long before and passed it on. It's an industry. It's a cultural activity and a culture in and of itself, the taking in of the sap, the boiling, the syrup. That's a tree with a story. It's not just a tree that has pretty leaves. Signage about the life cycle and history of a sugar maple gets you interested in that tree more so than just looking at it in a sign. That's what local parks don't always have. And that's something that I think would become different out of this experience is the interpretation of that landscape so that people not only understand it, but understand why it's protected and want to see it more protected and other places also under that. That's the goal of this type of planning.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I think that that's definitely something that would enhance, you know, a lot of the properties. You know, it's done by like volunteers, so things kind of like someone has to say, I want to do that. But you know, yeah, I think, you know, it'd be great to go through the process. We also have the volunteer land stewards. So like, let's say you did this property and it worked out and you wanted to do another one, you know, we could pull in the volunteer land stewards because I don't think we have a volunteer land steward for Muddy Brook North. Yeah.
It's
Just a question, it's not particular to this, but if that's indeed the project, the parcel, is the town still going forward with some sort of senior center building there? Because it just argues even more important that that
Different
parcel.
properties.
Yeah,
so,
right. This would be, yeah.
Yeah, they're separate. The parcel that was proposed for the building is not conservation.
Right, so I understand they're separate, but it's just even more of an argument to develop signage at that site as opposed to something way off in the middle of the forest. That there's likely to be
Right,
an
it could
audience
be
there.
potentially, right, more accessible to the public if there's a public building there. I see what you're saying.
Peter, location is location of signage and messaging is based on how best to convey the nature of the resource to the visitor. You could have a bench and an interpretive sign by a brook, and just have someone be able to sit there and listen to the water. That's an experience. And the signage can include how Native Americans related to the landscape of which that brook or river or whatever may be a part. One thing that I find missing in this community, although we have names all over the place, very little cultural information about Native Americans in Mendon.
True. Right.
Although we have a high school, we have a lake, but they lived here. There was a massacre here that we'll just put aside for a moment. But this landscape was inhabited by people long before we all got
I
here.
would just say that they tended to live in the valleys. They wouldn't have lived up on the ridge line, but that would be.
They might have lived right near Muddy Brook because that was a water supply, and who knows? I read the farm recently acquired that while it wasn't explored by the consultant who did kind of the inventory, there was the owner said there were mounds perhaps on the property.
On the Denton property is this you're talking about, or?
It's a farm.
Yeah,
It's in there. It's,
Oaken Wall Farm Preserve, that one maybe?
I don't know.
Just, yeah.
I don't know. I just read the report and it said that we didn't explore, the consultant did not
Yeah.
explore it. But the owner mentioned some mounds. And I'm not interested in the mounds themselves, but I would be interested in how stories and information about indigenous people in Mendon could be conveyed on a conservation land
Mhm.
in a realistic and rational manner, and a logical manner, because there was this relationship.
Yeah, I mean, and also that would require pulling in people from that tribe, to,
And
Do that.
that's part of the experience. And people from that tribe may be able to provide experiences for visitors that come in terms of events and things of that nature. But that's
Mhm.
dreaming in the future. I think the question is how you get there, and that's what this process is really trying to achieve. But we'd love to have your participation, or at least one person from here.
yeah, we should get one person from the
Okay,
community.
we will hopefully be coming to you.
Yeah.
Select board.
Well, and I wondered, is there, I know you're looking for someone from land use to join you, but is there room for other community participation? So like because there have been community members, for example, who
Oh.
expressed an interest in joining the Conservation Commission or like joining committees. Would there be an opportunity for someone to be part of the conversation without being part of a formal committee?
Yeah, there's two things. One, when I think initially a few people who represent this little task force have to sit down and say, who else needs to be involved, number one. Secondly, we need to design a public involvement process that is meaningful. Who certainly adjacent landowners are interested in what may happen, to a conservation land. But there are other folks in this community and maybe even outside this community that want to voice their concerns or their ideas as to what the future of these properties may be. So that's a public involvement process that really has to be designed by whatever the task force ends up being.
I would be tempted to say, I wouldn't put a number on it. Why not open to everyone? Because when we did something, I can understand the master plan required. I thought that that was kind of limiting, having one person from 5 different committees. It's necessary and important. But this is not going to come down to a vote, right? This is going to be generated by a consensus of people who care. And so they don't need to be a member of an existing committee if they have the passion or want to spend the time to come to an open meeting. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, you're correct, Peter, and it's not so much that you can have a task force of 90 people because you'll never get anywhere. You need a core group that can start planning and relating to everyone else. It's how else you involve people in the process that becomes important.
And that's who are the other user groups, because that it boils down to who is the audience, right? And so you mentioned visitors, and that would be the outside visitors. That's a component. I would suggest politically, it's the town owner, townspeople who paid the land to buy it, and what they want to use it. Is it active recreation? Well, I'm not here in recreation. I'm here in nature and cultural, and so there's a lot of issues.
The first step in undertaking any process is to have what you might define as a scoping meeting. And that is that you go out, you advertise it, you have anybody who wants to come in, and at least you go through a presentation slightly like this, but a little shorter. You ask people what they believe the future of this property should be. I know the answer to that question before I even ask it. We want hunting, we want hiking, we want to fish, and we want to, in some sector, I just want a place where it's quiet and I can commune with nature. That's the range of things that you're going to get. In the end, you have to put all that together and what's feasible, what's in the interest of the resource, what's in the interest of the community. And you keep doing that throughout the process. It's not a one-time activity, but there are very key people that you may want to include as members of a task force. Who's going to build the trails? Well, maybe we need the Boy Scouts. So we need to involve the Boy Scouts in that discussion, where that trail will be and all the rest. It's a process that just has to be well thought out.
Well, I'll ask around about who might want to be in the committee. And also, like, if you ended up wanting to inform the outside public about this might be a good article to write that you could give us for the newspaper.
I'm sorry.
Perfect timing.
If you wanted to, let the public know about what you're doing once it got going, or you wanted people for the committee, an article on, the project would be
Yes.
good.
Yes. First of all, we need to have the blessing of the select board.
Select board, yeah.
I don't think we, as a conservation commission or as a non-established entity, just want to go off and do things. I think we do need to at least have a consent of the select committee that this is
Call it an
okay.
advisory committee to the Conservation Commission, or you?
Or like a working,
I don't.
I don't know, but I mean, I agree that it's useful to come before the select board, and whether it needs the select board approval, I think it's useful to have that discussion. I think
The blessing.
the blessing, and then, I mean, in terms of like the structure of town government, I think our town administrator will weigh in about what the nature of whether it's going to be a like formally appointed committee or a working group. And I think, considering how open meeting laws will come into play for this, certainly that's an issue, even if it's not a quorum of any committee. If it's an appointed committee, then I think open meeting laws would apply. So these are discussions I think it is good to have with the select board and with the town administrator to consider.
I mean, I think we don't want to end up with 6 months down the road is, what the hell are these people doing?
I agree. Right. I agree. I think, yeah, communication is really helpful. So yes.
And the select board meeting is good because it's recorded and people
Yeah,
care about
I
it.
think
and,
so.
you
I
know,
think
But
yeah.
structurally, I agree too. Yeah.
Right.
There's a legitimacy that's given to an effort like this.
Right. Whether it needs to be a formal vote or
Yeah.
not. So that's another question.
And also, and we have to be very upfront, at the end of this, there may be the need for expenditure of money.
Right.
You know, the signs have to be paid for, the trail has to be built, those things. So
Right.
I think everyone has to understand what's the end product of all of this. Okay.
So I've just a couple of questions, just sort of logistically. So you're looking for, so you mentioned a 5 to 10 year plan, but also maybe a 1 year pilot.
Well, no,
Project.
it's the period of the plan, it's, I come from the National Park Service, we do 15-year
Okay.
plans, okay? I told Peter the other day, that sometimes it takes us 15 years to get that done, but the time period normally is a framework of 15. I think that for a local situation is too long. I think a 5-year, perhaps a 10-year planning horizon is adequate. What you want to do out of that plan, however, once it's done, is very quickly get into implementation. So you do need to attach to that, perhaps as the last chapter, that the year 1 implementation of the 5-year plan includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 activities. They will be financed by this method. The people responsible is perhaps the Township Recreation Department has a role to play in this. We need to assign responsibilities for implementation.
And then I guess just a quick question. I know we're bumping,
And I start another meeting. too,
yeah,
so-
running into the next
like,
meeting,
yeah.
but I guess one question that I think you can expect from the select board, so I'll ask it, is are there examples of other Massachusetts communities that have done a similar project of this scale? Is that is like, we often like to find out like, oh, how, like, is there another town that we can model this after?
Yeah,
If not Massachusetts, maybe another town,
Yeah.
another state.
Columbia Woods would be a good example.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too new to
Right.
tell you
But it
the
might
answer
be
to
a
that.
question, maybe a little, something to look into before. Like, because it is a question that comes up often is, what other towns have done this? Are there other towns? that
I
have done it?
think there's no question that there are other towns who have planned conservation lands in their community.
Right.
I don't know that there are other communities in Massachusetts that have gone to this is what we want people to know and experience in this land. That's where it may be different.
Right.
Lots of towns have plans for physical improvements, but they may not have the messaging
Right.
or the experience that people could have with the natural resource. That's a state park and national park and type of.
Terry, did I hear in answer to the question that the time frame for the plan should be 5 to 10 years, but you're looking at this as a 1-year pilot, kind of give it a year to see what comes of it and
Well,
then
no,
quickly
no,
get it implemented
I'm
or
not
say,
look-
no, we can't do it, or.
We're not looking at it as a 1-year pilot. We're saying within the framework of that 5 years, we want to get off the ground quickly. The plan has to include what actually will occur on the ground in the first year. During the first year, you plan for the second year, et cetera, and you go down the line until the whole 5-year plan has been achieved.
Because I would argue it's ultimately got to fit into the town's open space and recreation plan, which has to be updated. And so it's
Yeah.
it's an ongoing living document. And this is a
I'm
pilot
gonna-
project.
Yeah, we have to start another meeting at 7. But Terry, now we know your project, and so we can ask few questions, if people have, questions or input, we can be in touch and Isabella. right,
she
of
is the
course.
go-between of everything.
Yeah. So thank you so much for putting so much thought into it because it's one area that we haven't had time, really to do it or enough people. So thank you. And also Isabella, the Michael that I worked with was the Michael Berry. It wasn't the Michael you were talking about in terms of the forestry.
CPC.
Yeah, I don't know who he is. I don't think. So,
Thank you all.
thank you. And be in touch. Would you be able to, next month, hey, Peter, next month, would you be able to meet the first Tuesday at 6 o'clock again?
I assume so. So we're talking February. First week of February.
February 3rd at 6 o'clock. That seemed like it would work. I can't do the second week, so.
I can do that.
Okay, great. All right,
First Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll send a message. Okay, all those in favor? Which one?
That's all right.
Aye.
Had a motion to adjourn.
Ariana.
I think I can. Okay, Barry,
Aye.
Lena, I.
Coffin eye.
Frank,
Frank, aye.
and I. Okay, thank you. So February
Thank you.
3rd, 6 o'clock.
So I get to do this all over again?
Yeah, sorry.
February 3rd.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Step up here, Mike.
You know.
And this is not a hibernation.
Okay. February 3rd.